Throughout human history, nothing has been more intoxicating or destructive than the pursuit of power. And we mean real power, the ability to control people, influence world events, and have your every whim catered for. Does that sound fabulous to you? Or are you wary of the idea? As far as Shakespeare was concerned, the pursuit of power in England has always been a bloody business, which is why it makes for top-notch drama. And the action in this Elizabethan blockbuster is driven by our protagonist's pursuit of royal power. Of course, Richard is the eponymous protagonist of the play, which means it's named after him as the main character. Usually, protagonists have at least some admirable or heroic qualities, but Richard is the villain we love to hate. Apparently, the real King Richard III wasn't nearly as dastardly. But why let the truth get in the way of a good story? Shakespeare also depicts Richard as a major villain to uphold the legitimacy of Queen Elizabeth I, England's ruling monarch at the time. That's why her family, the Tudors, come out of this play smelling like roses, dipped in blood. Hey team, just a reminder, if you like this video, please hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It really helps the channel out, and our next upload could be on something taught in your next class. Thanks, and back to the video. Speaking of roses, the play's historical backdrop is the Wars of the Roses. This was a 32-year-long civil conflict between rival aristocratic families, all fighting for the English crown. When the play opens, Richard's family, the Yorks, have just defeated their rivals, the Lancasters, at the Battle of Tewkesbury. The emblem of the House of York is a white rose, while the House of Lancasters is a red rose. To secure their victory, the Yorks killed the Lancastrian king and his son, then crowned Richard's older brother, Edward, King of England. This is where the drama begins. It's not enough for Richard to have titles, castles, and riches as the Duke of Gloucester. He wants to be king. Why? Because, as he explains in his opening soliloquy, peacetime is boring. Remember, a soliloquy is when a character, alone on stage, shares their innermost thoughts with the audience. As Richard details his discontent with life due to his deformities, he says he has no delight to pass away the time. To put it bluntly, women find him ugly, while his compatriots channel their male aggression into sportive tricks in bedrooms. Richard is a loner. So, since he cannot prove a lover, he's going to entertain himself by being a villain. Richard launches his plots in Act 1 by pitting his older brothers, King Edward and George, Duke of Clarence, in deadly hate against each other. Richard has secretly spread false prophecies about his brother Clarence, so the king has Clarence mewed up or imprisoned in the Tower of London. Here, Shakespeare introduces the motif, or recurring symbol, of prophecies and curses in Richard III. This adds some supernatural spice to the play, which is something his Elizabethan audience would have enjoyed. The motif of prophecies and curses is a handy way for Shakespeare to foreshadow or hint at the dismantling of power. Over the first 4 acts, we watch Richard bustle his way to the top. But by the time we reach Act 5, we realise that there are more powerful forces at play, like the curses of grief-stricken women. And of all the feisty women in the play, Queen Margaret delivers the best curses by far. In Act 1, Richard gloats that "I was born so high, our eyrie buildeth in the cedar's top." The metaphor of the eagle's nest illustrates Richard's self-aggrandizement. He perceives himself as high and untouchable. Remember, a metaphor is when one thing is described as something else, even though it isn't literally true. Queen Margaret, who's bereft of power since the murder of her Lancastrian king, extends the metaphor and turns it into a curse. She reminds Richard, and everyone else in the room, that "your eyrie buildeth in our eyrie's nest. O God, that seest it, do not suffer it. As it was won with blood, lost be it so." It turns out God was listening that day. With each death attributed to Margaret's curses, Shakespeare reminds English Christians that monarchs come and go, but God is eternal. This reinforces the Renaissance ideology of the great chain of being, a strict hierarchy of living things over which God is the supreme ruler. But before we enjoy his downfall, let's see how Richard works his Machiavellian schemes. Remember, a Machiavel is someone who puts morality aside and does whatever is necessary to secure their power. Check out our lesson on context to learn more about that. At the end of Act 1, Richard arranges the assassination of his brother Clarence, who's third in line to the throne. Richard hurries his paid assassins off, ordering them to go, dispatch. Richard's impatient tone or emotion in this command conveys his sense of urgency. He needs this dirty job done so he can deliver the news to his other brother, King Edward. Conveniently for Richard, King Edward is dying. All he needs is a good shock to finish him off. When Richard lies to the king that Clarence, poor soul, by your first order died, Shakespeare has most of the main characters assembled on stage. They are the audience to Richard's pretend grief and witnesses to the king's genuine devastation. This crowded scene in Act 2 characterises or depicts Richard as a sadist who enjoys the spectacle of pain. At the end of his guilt-ridden monologue, or extended speech addressed to his entire court, the king calls out, "Come, Hastings, help me to my closet. Oh, poor Clarence." This exclamation, or sentence that ends with an exclamation mark, contains the king's last words before he dies. This just leaves the king's heirs, his two young princes, to dispatch. To orchestrate this, Richard needs backup. Enter the Duke of Buckingham. Induced with promises of titles and riches, Buckingham helps Richard gain power by doing his dirty work. Shakespeare portrays their underhanded scheming in duologues, which is a dialogue between two characters only. It shows us how Richard's pursuit of the crown is done covertly, rather than openly and honestly. Well, it involves murder, after all. After they send the princes to the Tower of London for a holiday, Richard and Buckingham set their sights on Hastings, the king's trusted friend. Having him on side would greatly help Richard's cause. In a brief but nasty little duologue, Hastings' fate is sealed, and Buckingham is characterised as a self-serving lackey. He asks Richard, "What shall we do if we perceive Lord Hastings will not yield to our complots?" To which Richard replies, "Chop off his head, man, and look, when I am king, claim thou of me the earldom of Hereford." In other words, kill Hastings if he doesn't join the dark side, and claim your reward when I'm king. Thus, Buckingham sells his soul. Of course, this doesn't end well for him. But let's look at one of Buckingham's finer moments, when he directs the metatheatrical wooing of the citizens on Richard's behalf. Metatheatre is when a dramatic text makes a self-reference to theatre. Shakespeare uses this technique in Act 3 to satirise the showy, artificial behaviour of ambitious aristocrats. It's very much like modern-day politicians. Remember, satire is the use of humour, irony or exaggeration to criticise aspects of human behaviour. Like a real director, Buckingham stages Richard's appearance to the commoners. He tells Richard to get a prayer book in your hand and stand betwixt two churchmen. Play the maid's part. And the illusion works. By the end of the scene, the citizens are convinced that Richard is the only legitimate heir to the throne. Even though public voting isn't a thing in the 1400s, Richard needs the support of the people. If he's to be king, he wants his crown to be secure. This brings us to Act 4, where Shakespeare reminds us about the paranoia of powerful people. When Richard finally ascendeth his throne, he should feel pretty good, right? Shakespeare's stage direction visually portrays this as the culmination of Richard's pursuit of power. Stage directions are the playwright's instructions for actors and directors that accompany the dialogue. Shakespeare was generally quite sparse with his stage directions, giving lots of creative freedom to thespians. But there are some crucial actions, like Richard's ascent to the throne. That must be performed at certain moments. And in theatre, it's all about timing, because as soon as Richard rests his royal rear end, his paranoia sets in. He pulls Buckingham aside and asks, "Shall we wear these honours for a day, or shall they last?" Here, Shakespeare portrays the irony of Machiavellian tyrants. Their situation ends up the opposite of what we expect. The more power they have, the less secure they feel, and the more desperate they become. In Act 5, the motif of prophecies and curses reaches its climax as Richard is visited by the ghosts of his victims. It's the eve of the Battle of Bosworth, where Richard must fight for his crown against Henry Tudor, Earl of Richmond. You'll remember from our lesson on context that Henry Tudor is Elizabeth I's granddad. The staging of the famous ghost scene juxtaposes the nocturnal experiences of Richard and Richmond. Remember, juxtaposition occurs when two things are placed side by side to create an interesting contrast. And what a contrast! While Richard is cursed to despair and die by the ghosts of his victims, Richmond is blessed to live and flourish. These supernatural tidings symbolise or represent God's endorsement of Richmond's pursuit of power. Thus, when the two great adversaries meet in battle, Richard's slaughter is cause for great celebration. His reign of terror is over, and balance is restored in the play's denouement, or resolution. The crown, Richard's beloved symbol of power, is plucked from his dead temples and handed to Richmond. Hooray! Wait, so why is Richmond's bloody pursuit of power glorified while Richard's is despised? Ultimately, Richard is portrayed as a sadistic, Machiavellian usurper, which was a dirty word in Elizabethan England. It refers to someone who wrongfully seizes power, often by bloody force. History tends to condemn people like that. Then again, history is often written by the victors. But was it Shakespeare's job to be historically accurate in this play? Or was it to entertain us and keep us marvelling at the complexity of power? We hope you enjoyed this Schooling Online production. For more easy lessons, check out our other videos.